We're live. I'm live here again with Dan Higgins, from the Garage Grappling down in Brisbane. He's in isolation at the moment, just waiting for a few more tests to clear. So I thought we'd have another chat today and take us down some rabbit holes. Now I got to, just so you know, I got a few messages from the last conversation with people that enjoyed listening to your points of view on jiu-jitsu and other things. So that was
Nice.
cool. So I thought I'd relay that.
Excellent. Thank you to them.
Yeah, pleasure. So I was sitting the other day and I was just thinking about when after we had the chat for gi versus no gi, it was like, oh, it's 2020 and we're still talking about it. And to be honest, I think the curiosity in humans, like, there's always going to be a section of the community that's relearning these things over and over. It's one of the reasons why I always love to have a few coaches in my back pocket to go to. And you've been kind enough to be one of those guys for me the last couple of years, through a mutual friend of ours, Damien, who you coach as well. And I was just thinking, it would be really good for the MMA community in particular to maybe just get some solid strategy on some style versus style stuff.
Yeah.
So the first one I'd like to pick apart, because we talked about it briefly in one of our conversations, and you may or may not remember it, but that kind of Lyoto Machida, Wonderboy Thompson kind of Shotokan karate style, where they're a little bit lower on their legs and bouncing in and out, hands down, tending to, more often than not to counterfight. What would be your favorite strategy for dealing with those, and what type of problems do those guys really present for us?
Cool. There's a couple of things that come from being a point karate fighter that can be problematic. And of course, it depends on what skill set and what point of view you're coming from as the opposition, I guess. But fundamentally, particularly when Machida came along, he was problematic. For grapplers that wanted to engage him, because point fighters fight from almost double the distance as Thai boxers, or Western boxers for that matter. They have long stances and their chins are up, but they fight from double the distance, and they've got very good timing at getting that one shot off, because the rules dictate behaviour. And those kind of guys, Wonderboy Thompson's the same. They've grown up in their formative years doing that touch contact on the chin, so they're very good. Their eyes dialed in, and they're very good at hitting that chin at range, if that makes sense. So first, I think it's important to identify what strong suits that they have. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. You got to know what standing, and then I suppose we have to look at the other side. What skill sets do we have to put on them as well? So I mean, that's something that, like, I suppose you're going to think about with your guys. I mean, there's no point having one of your guys that has terrible leg kicks then attacking his legs, or maybe that's something that you work on, that you fix. So how would you deal with it?
Well, I think Shogun Hua laid down the blueprint there, in some regards. One thing, if you overly aggressive and headhunt those guys or shoot takedowns without setting anything up, they're major dramas. That's gonna be very problematic. So that was Rashad Evans, those kind of guys, Tito Ortiz. They come unstuck in the early days with that. They just come in like a bull at a gate, attacking the head and or shooting takedowns without setting them up properly, and they were just walking straight into, as you say, that highly trained defensive counter-strike type game, if that makes sense. So Yeah. Shogun Hua was the first one who gave, obviously in their second fight, he knocked him out. But very difficult with point fighters to touch the chin off the bat because they're so used to not wanting to be touched, let alone hit at all. So if you do have that skill set and you possess it, leg kicks are the enemy for that karate style, that almost that horse riding stance side on style. And punishing the body and not being so quick to pull the trigger on punching the head all the time. And on a side note, I think hitting the body is criminally underdone in MMA, has been for a long time.
Yeah.
So body shots are important. And the other thing I would say, linear is king with point fighters. Sure, Machida comes from Shotokan, and his father's style, they claim, is they use a lot more angles. But generally speaking, particularly Shotokan and point fighting in general is very linear. So if you come at them on a straight line, generally speaking, I would suggest if I was coaching someone, that wouldn't be a good strategy either. So you have to have functional stand-up. And at the end of the day, if you're coming into modern day MMA and you can't throw punches and kicks correctly, you probably shouldn't be doing it.
Now we've seen a rise of the calf kicks. Is that something that you would look to employ to set up more leg kicks and body shots on those guys?
Yep.
Would that be something to do? Because I mean, that's even less commitment. Again, it's lower and it's a little bit faster, and it's starting to make its way in as a very useful and common technique for wearing those people down.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. I mean, generally, calf kicks aside, generally the more varied your attacks throughout the body is, the better. And the other one too that draws out defensive fighters are fakes and feints. Yeah, fakes and feints. So if you can draw them into prematurely pulling the trigger on a counter shot and you enter in behind that, then that's also a good option. And once you're inside that range, most of those tournament fighters have been, when they've had their clock cleaned, it's been, with overhand rights, left hooks, straight punches. Hard to get a beat on those kind of guys with straight punches, because 99.9% of point fighting is a straight punch. They rarely employ hooks, overhand rights, so on and so forth.
That's something that we see now, I suppose, with Israel Adesanya, is like he's obviously throws an amazing amount of feints. Like he spends most of his fight feigning. So it's interesting that evolution and how strategical and tactical people are becoming. So I love that, and I love the fact that Shogun was one of the first people that figured out Machida too, because he was one of the old school kind of Vale Tudo fighters, whereas people kind of like those guys aren't as technical, but man, I think Shogun Hua is still super technical.
Yeah, I think that's a bit of it's just because of that. That's a very simplistic view of that old school shooto box style. But at the end of the day, it's a very sound, providing you've got the intestinal fortitude and the warrior spirit to do it, it's a very sound tactical option to overwhelm point karate fighters with violence. And that's basically what Shogun did. He just, as much as I'm a Machida fan, I thought he won the first fight too. I think that's, but either he just overwhelmed Machida. He just didn't get caught in his rhythm. He didn't get caught in his rhythm. Just overwhelmed him with violence and the sheer, the tempo and the volume of strikes. Machida wasn't used to it. If you stand there with a guy like Machida or Wonder Boy, and there's other karate guys running around now, but if you go pot shot for pot shot with those guys and try to be too cerebral in your approach, generally speaking, people get themselves in trouble.
Yeah,
because that's if you watch, you could get on YouTube now and watch any point karate fight, and it will be two guys bouncing on their feet with nothing, seemingly to the naked eye, nothing doing for a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and then they'll explode and throw one technique. So if you think about that, and you're in a prize fight or a cage fight or an MMA fight or whatever with one of those type of characters, and you're staying at that range and trying to figure them out as they're trying to figure you out, you could be a millisecond away from closing your eyes at the wrong time and then waking up looking at the ceiling.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, let's have a think about another style. Now, this one kind of perplexes me a little bit, but if you had to deal with like a Tyrone Woodley, someone looking for that big shot, pressing you up against the cage, he's obviously going to wrestle you a bunch. What would be the strategy to employ against somebody like that?
Well, first of all, you got to have your chin down with someone like that. It depends. If like on the surface of things, if you can keep Tyrone Woodley at range, I think that's important. Yeah, if you can use angles with him, he's another one that if you stand in front of him, those type of fighters that use that physicality, it's all about angles as well. If you can't employ angles in your game, then you're, by virtue of that, you're going to be standing in front of someone. And Tyrone Woodley really is very much a physicality-based kind of guy. I don't think he's got technically sharp stand-up. He just punches really, really hard, and he's uber athletic and really big and strong for his division. If you can negate that with angles and not be in front of him, I think that's really, really important. And that's for any boxer wrestler, which, let's face it, that's what Tyrone Woodley is. He's a boxer wrestler. Angles problem solves a lot of these issues. It problem solves those big looping punches that he throws. I mean, I know this is only theory, right? Those big looping power shots, but it also gets them second guessing with that takedown as well. If you stand in front of someone like that, then especially with those little gloves on, then you better be as big and as strong and as good at what he does as what he is. Yeah. If that makes sense. Is that Greg Jackson used to call it that, mate? It's that eternal battle between the matador and the bull, and you better decide which one you are. Some guys will be the bull some guys will be the bull every time they fight, like Robbie Lawler, and some guys like Machida will always be the matador. But some people, if you can, ideally, which is why I respect and I think, I still think no one ever brings his name up, but in my opinion, Demetrius Johnson is the best example of a mixed martial artist that we've ever seen. And he can do both because he's the only fighter I can think of. There's no weaknesses. He's elite level on the ground. He's got top shelf wrestling. He can stand in the pocket and kickbox, and he can use angles. And like he can one fight, he's the matador. The next fight, he's the bull. Very difficult to prepare for somebody like that.
Yeah, and look, I love that, and I think that's great advice for any young guys out there in the gym. Like, bully in the gym, 100% of the time is gonna hold you back from developing. Sometimes you need to spend rounds counterfighting and letting people into the game and working skill sets instead of trying to win every single round, because eventually you just become undone. Because I think Hector's a good example of that. When he meets somebody that matches his violence, he stops fighting.
Who's that?
Hector Lombard. I feel like he's going to murder you in the first minute, or he'll cruise and survive from that point onwards. Which is I'm not being murdered by him, but this is the thing. If you can't fight on the back foot and you don't have all those spots for guys that want to be future MMA fighters or future champions, you got to develop all aspects.
In that big picture type stuff about being a martial artist and having some longevity, and then passing it forward as a coach later on in life, all of that stuff becomes even more important. It's like that. It's like the old adage, mate. If you use just physical strength, there's always going to be someone who's stronger than you, and it's the same as what we're talking about here. If you're always on the back foot, you cutting angles and using footwork, then given a long enough timeline, you're going to start slowing. That's why Machida's not as potent as he was, because he's movement based and he just can't move like that anymore. And he's going to find young guys come along that can move just like that, but they're younger and they're faster. So for a guy like that to be able to develop the skill set early on of also being the bull, planting your feet, standing in the middle of the cage, commanding the center ground. I think you need both. It's like getting away from prize fighting for a second. It's like jiu-jitsu. Nobody enjoys that slow pressure game as much as I do in my older age. But I'm just, before this quarantine, I'm still going through a stage with the boys at the moment where, believe it or not, I'm playing a movement-based game. It sucks. You know, I'm not 25 anymore, but I'm moving with the boys and trying to outflank them and outwork them. And because I can't always use a physical, staunch, stoic approach to the game because I'm not the strongest guy in the world, and I might come up against someone who's bigger and stronger than me. So I think both for you as a martial artist to be well-rounded, be it striking or grappling, to employ one sort of go down one track too much is not necessarily healthy. But certainly as an instructor, like the position you're in, not everyone's got that capability to be the way you want to make them, or you know, they may very want to, you know, especially that standing in the pocket stuff like a bull. Not everyone's capable of doing that, and ideally you can impart that into somebody. But I think, I'm digressing a little bit, but I think it's important if you can do both. It affords you more tactical decisions. If you're getting back to your question with the Tyrone Woodley, a puncher grappler, heavy hands, pushes you in the fence, and if you survive his punches, he's shooting in on you. If you're another bull, the chances of you being better than him at that are slim and none.
Yeah. I think we could go down that rabbit hole a little bit too, because I've thought about this before. It's like, okay, I definitely don't want people to be a carbon copy of me. I started late in life, and I think people should be developing better skills than I had when I was at the top of my competition. But, you know, before my knees fell apart and I decided to transition to being a coach and not a competitor. I don't want people to look like me when they kickbox, box, or grapple. And then I was like, well, what non-negotiables do I have as a coach? And I think my non-negotiable as a coach has been defensive skills, so people can decide whether they want to be the bull or the matador. Because I think to fight in the pocket, you need to have good head movement and a great guard, and to counter fight, you need to have good movement and a great guard. So I think it's the bridge of the gap between those two things for people to be able to stylistically decide what they want to be good at is a really solid defense. What would you suggest?
Yeah, that transcends any of the ranges. It's a non-negotiable. Your fundamental offense and defense has to be on point, regardless of what tactics you employ or what style of fighter, for want of a better term. I have found that, particularly with striking, that whatever tactics you employ can be largely determined by your character.
Mm-hmm.
Especially that standing in the pocket. It's a rare individual. It's a rare individual that can stand there and with absolute faith in themselves and that kind of undying mongrel type aggression and stand in front of someone no matter what and back themselves. That's a 1 in a million. If that makes sense. So
No, it does make, and that's the exception to the rule, like bars, etc.
Yeah, if your basics, like you've already alluded to, your defense is on point. like you talk about just there, if you've got poor defense, all the mongrel in the world and all the desire to stand in the pocket's still going to get you knocked out.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're 100% right. As long as your fundamentals are squared away, how you fight can be really predicated by. I know in jiu-jitsu there's a lot of people talk about different games based on body type, and whilst there's a certain amount of truth in that, I think the thing not spoken about enough is different games based on personality. It's why catch can wrestling sort of wrestling thing is not as popular as jiu-jitsu, because you've really fundamentally got to be an A-type personality to reap the benefits of that style of grappling. You've got to really want to impose your will and inflict pain on people. You've got to be a sadistic bastard, and not everyone wants to be that, if that makes sense. So in terms of the striking, yep, same thing. Your fundamentals got to be on point. Good head movement, chin down, good eye. Eye is crucial. So I don't care what sort of striker you want to be. If you haven't got your flinch reflex under control, you're probably never going to be a high level striker. So all those ticks in the boxes have got to be there. And then whether you stand in the pocket in front of someone or cut angles, maybe either I'm oversimplistic here, but could be A, your personality, or B, your particular skill set and personality and how it marries up to the individual in front of you.
Yeah.
We all know fighters that are one-trick ponies that will only stand. They'll just stand there no matter what. But ideally, as a coach, you want to produce someone who has the flexibility to do both.
Yep. 100% agree with that. Like, especially if you're like aiming to like encourage people that when they fight, like they have that champion mindset and not be caught by dogma. So that's one of the things that I keep trying to make sure I do myself, because I'm fairly uncompromising. So it can be sometimes when I get an idea in my head, I can sometimes stray towards dogmatic thinking. This is good, that is not good. So it's something I try and avoid. But there's something that you said before, and we always end up circling back to this. But training that flinch response out is so bloody important. And I would argue that if you haven't trained out your flinch response, because sometimes I've seen it take, for kids, it can take 3-4 years to train out that flinch response. Now, you can't just throw it to the side and say they'll never get it. Lily had a terrible flinch response from 11 all the way through to 14. Now she's standing in the pocket with adults without flinching. The same with adults. Now, I would argue that if you're not training your flinch response, so you're just purely doing jiu-jitsu, you're not training self-defense, because your flinch response isn't there. So you'll never be able to deal with real-world violence, and that's going to be a controversial.
Have I told you my flinch response story, and it's pertinent because you're from North Queensland? Have I told you that when I lived in Cairns?
I think so, but let's let everyone else know, because it's a good one.
Yeah, why not? I have a healthy enough. I don't. It's I think it's good for people to know, because I think it's what's made me a decent coach. But anyway, nonetheless, as you know, lifetime karate guy, and but grew up in a fair, a beautiful sort of family situation, and I wasn't sure after this is kind of just as I was getting into the grappling, and I followed my wife to Cairns, and we were living in North Queensland in Cairns. She was up there with QPS. I wasn't sure, I had all this karate skill and was just getting into grappling, but I wasn't confident if I could handle a real fight, because I hadn't been in many growing up, just a couple, just schoolyard scuffles. So, like any decent martial artist, I plunged head on into it, and I started doing security work and door work, and I'd just get into. There was no jiu-jitsu back then; it was all this shoot wrestling stuff. Obviously, nothing in Cairns, so I started boxing up there. As you probably know, Cairns has had a fairly healthy boxing scene for quite a while. And after all these years, even Japan, Japan was tough and all that sort of stuff. But I had these young boxers in Cairns, and that flinch reflex, man, they were just beating the absolute pick handles out of me. I just wasn't used all those years of sports karate, I'm just going to put this on charge and talk to you standing up. All those years of sports karate, I just couldn't handle. I wasn't handling the kicks. Sorry, not the kicks. That contact. And and anyway, my flinch reflex thing. Everyone's story is different. Was overnight. I even remember it was a Tuesday, and it was 1999. After all these years of martial arts, and it was like a Tuesday night boxing, and I was always good on the pads, and I looked like a pro boxer on the bag and skipping and all the rest of it. But I was like nervous about sparring, and I remember going home and it was like a aha type moment. I thought, I'm going back to boxing tomorrow. If I don't, I know it sounds dramatic, but if I'm going to walk through those punches and I'm not going to close my eyes, or I'm going to die trying. It was literally one of those type situations. And I I remember saying to myself, if I can't, I'm just going to give it away. There's no point. That's how serious I took myself, I guess, in those days. So anyway, mate, no bullshit. In the space of one session, I went from the guy that just wanted to hit the pads and not spar to the guy who wanted to spar and not hit pads.
Yeah, because it's definitely. I remember having like really bad flinch responses. Even like maybe my first or second fight, I think I still had like some poor habits, and hell, I probably still have some. I probably still have some now. But for those of you out there that are struggling, think, oh, I'm just never going to get this. You will one day. You can just overnight decision and change those belief systems about martial arts and fighting and even personal growth, and make that change on one decision.
Especially if you make a conscious effort, like your daughter's ages now, they're in an environment where they will get it. Because you take my circumstance, I was 23 or 24 or something, but I just, through tournament karate and non-contact, and it was hard training. I got beaten up, but there was just no, it just never really crossed my mind, to be honest with you. So if you're doing really good reality-based training, you're in a credible MMA type gym that offers jiu-jitsu and boxing and that, it will come much quicker than at 24 years of age if you started as a kid, put it that way.
Well, and we're trying our best to pay it forward all in our own ways. Like, we want people to do it better than we did it, faster than we did it, and and hopefully take that strategy and everything next level as well. Like, I'm really looking forward to that, and I think the Australian community, from it just going to fight nights now, the skill level has definitely risen, but you can tell the difference between some gyms zero fights for their guys and zero for other fighters, and there's still some crazy belief systems going around. Like, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu purple belt is now, it's like, oh, I can't fight that guy because he's got a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu purple belt. The second and third guys that I ever fought were Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu purple belts. Then and now, like, for some reason people have put them up on this crazy pedestal. I think 30 boxing fights or 20 Thai boxing fights definitely make more sense to me than Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu purple belt, even though you do need at least a good 12 months or so of grappling behind you to at least understand how to defend submission and change positions. Well, mate, but just Jiu-Jitsu, you're going to have to cook someone.
I know how you the sort of protocols that you impose on your fighters and what they have to do if they want to fight professionally, and you're 100% on the right track. I think if more people did that, brought fighters along slowly, like, even if I was to go down that track again, it would be X amount of amateur boxing or kickboxing fights with a winning record, and you got to be doing okay at no-gi, intermediate level grappling competitions, and then I'll let you fight. And that can take a year and a half, 2 years of training. That's I've I've always felt like that, and you're going to get a higher standard right off the bat. But you still got gyms that smack guys on the arse after 6 months training. Go in, you go.
Well, and Valet Tudo should be like, that's the pinnacle of like the martial artist, not like the starting point. Like, oh, I want to have a go. No, been having a go. You know, it should be the
like
testing your skills.
This is why I enjoyed the concept so much of Kudo and the combat sambo, and it's why fighting people from those parts of the world that have done things like combat sambo, that's essentially MMA in a gi, and they might fight 10 different guys on one day on a 6-month season in Russia from age 8 to their 25. Imagine trying to fight a dude like that.
Yeah.
You know, that's a lot of experience.
A lot.
But yeah.
Well, you know what? We might cut that one short today because my head's swimming in martial arts already. I absolutely love that today, Dan. And you know, we went down some different rabbit holes, but we got some of the style versus style talks out, and I know obviously
we went down the flinch thing. I knew you. I understand you wanted to have a talk about some other different hypotheticals. Sorry, mate.
No, I love it. It should be authentic, and we do go down that path a little bit because, again, while I don't market the gym as a self-defense gym, like one of the reasons I do martial arts is because of it. It's the study of fighting another human, you know. So it's definitely why I started mixed martial arts, because I'm really in that side of things, all rules and things aside. So I do love talking about it because I think it's important for people to understand where we're coming from and when we talk about these things. But thanks for your time, Dan, and I'm going to give you a buzz again soon, and I'm really looking forward to maybe doing these quite regularly and just sitting down and talking about different things to do with grappling and fighting and all things martial arts.
Imagine if we had a bottle of whiskey. It'd be scary.
Yeah. Well, that'll happen, but we might not live stream that one.
Righto, brother. I don't think that's a good idea.
It's in the cupboard waiting for you when you get up here. Thanks, Danny.
All right. See you, mate. See ya.